Hello and happy Friday, everyone. It's another wonderful day, one of the last remaining Fridays in March 2021. And what a way to end, or mostly kind of end this month. It's the Friday after St. Patty's Day. It's a fun holiday for a lot of us, but for me, today is the most fun because we have Mr. Bill Kirchen on our program today, and it's going to be an interesting program because I just realized that Bill Kirchen and our interviewer, our MC for the day, Bill Kilpatrick, are both BKs. So you'll have to pardon me if I start confusing my bills or whatnot. They're both exceptional gentlemen, and we're going to have a wild ride talking about Mr. Kirchen's wonderful career, his work, what he's been doing recently. And if you don't know, I love rockabilly. I love rockabilly. I love diesel billy now because I just learned about that genre, learning about Mr. Bill Kirchen. But he is a pioneer with Commander Cody and the Lost Airmen. I apologize if I didn't get the name right. I'm learning everything as I go along, Bill. But you're going to help us. You're going to set us straight what the story is, what your work is with them, and just let's go explore, all right? So, gentlemen, welcome to the program. Hope you're all doing well. Good to see you here.
Doing great, BJ.
Good to be seen. Thank you for having me.
That's what I say every day when I get up and out of. Hey, good to be seen still. Welcome to the BK and BK show. Bill, it's such a pleasure to have you on with us this afternoon.
Well, we're already having fun, just chit-chatting before the cameras rolled, so I'm glad to be here.
And that's what it's all about, having fun, telling stories, and sharing your experience. So I'm going to dive right in. Of course, I read your bio, read your website, and I recommend to everybody here, go check out Bill's website, full of great stories. And one of the elements that you combine with everything else, which is great chops, a really intelligent, witty songwriting, humility, but you also add a really generous dose of humor. You keep it light and you have fun with that. Is there a certain way that combination came about?
Sorry, I just kicked my camera.
It's all right. Just don't kick the interviewer and we'll be okay. How did you come up with that great combination?
There was a lot of humor in my household, my dad especially. But I grew up with, I graduated from high school in 65, so born in 48. So I grew up with Mad Magazine, Pogo, Donald Duck, and Uncle Scrooge, Walt Disney stuff. Seriously fabulous humor. And then we, of course, heard, all kinds of stuff, from Tom Lehrer to the Smothers Brothers on a little later when I was in high school. Love those guys. Love the Smothers Brothers. When we first got a TV, that was the show we watched, was the Smothers Brothers. So I've always been that's musical comedy right there. And I later got to meet Tom Smothers when I was working with Hoyt Axton, but that's another branch of the story. But at any rate, so there's all that humor around. So I liked music that had some of that. And I also grew up not so much on popular music till I was in the high school age, or junior high at the earliest, but on Broadway musicals, the Golden Age stuff, South Pacific, Oklahoma, King and I, My Fair Lady, all that. And that's funny. There's some funny stuff there. And classical music. So there was a lot of music and humor seem to fit right together. And
they really do. I mean, they go hand in hand. And you mentioning the Smothers Brothers, I know you're going to remember this bit. When Dick and Tommy would be playing their little duo stuff, Tommy would stop the song in the middle and he'd point to somebody in the audience and say, "You weren't singing." And his brother would say, "How can you tell they weren't singing? There's 500 people in the audience." "No, I was looking at you and I heard you not singing." And they went on from there.
Yeah, he had that great kind of surreal, out there humor thing that works so well. And and plus the things I meant, Pogo. I just was reading a whole bunch of Pogo lately. That Walt Kelly was a genius.
Absolutely. And you can't help but absorb some of that when you're watching it. You and I obviously grew up with a lot of that same humor. I think this question's a slam dunk, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So when you're working with other musicians, a band, maybe you're doing a duo or trio, if you had to pick one element that's the most important to you, what would it be?
Well, sense of humor leaps to mind, you know.
I told you that was a slam dunk.
But that's a fact. I really, certainly at this point in my life, I wouldn't want to work with anyone I didn't actually like, you know. It's, you know, no time for that at this point. And plus music's a kind of a exchange, and it would be difficult to do that. So you're going, it's not going to work. So, I haven't had to really ever. So, so, you know, that would be just compatibility. And I like to work with musicians who are better than me. You know, because
nothing like that to push you.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be up there lording over people or anything.
Right. And the old adage in the biz, if you have to sub out a gig, send a sub who's equal or better player than you are.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I read one of your quotes, which I thought was hilarious. People were asking you about the years you've been in the business, and your quote was, "Well, they don't make 50 years like they used to." Could you expound on that a little bit for everybody watching?
Well, what provoked that was thinking that realizing I'd been in the business 50 years. And of course, as you age, just like your folks told you, the calendar pages are flipping by at an alarmingly rapid rate these days. And I think back to 50 years ago when, say, well, we had Hot Rod Lincoln, for instance. We recorded that 50 years ago in 1971. And that, if you do the math, you'll find 50 years in between. And you go backwards from 1951, you get to 1921. And to me, now, as the years go by, perhaps to someone younger, that doesn't seem... At any rate, it's part of this is the perspective of someone in their 70s who, who back when you're a kid, a summer seems like it takes a century, you know, and now a year seems like it goes by in you know, a week. So, okay, a month, you know, but not this last year. This last year's dragged on.
Right. 2020 was the equivalent of 20 years.
Holy crickle. But like in 1921, they didn't have electrical recording yet. That was before the Hot 5 and the Louis Armstrong Hot 5 and Hot 7, which is the earliest music I've really ever listened to, was that stuff. I don't really know much of what came before them. I don't know who all, but there were certainly, and there was all the acoustic recordings from before that. But my musical education pretty much begins with Louis Armstrong.
Hot 5 and moving forward from there.
So, So the other thing I was going to say was when we were listening to let's take Hot Rod Lincoln again. That was an oldie when we did it. And it had first been done, the record we learned it from was by Johnny Bond. It had first been done in 1961, which was 10 years ago, man. Wow. That was ancient history. Now, you know.
Right.
Anyway, so it's just the perspective. That's why I said it, you know.
Of the 50 years. Well, it's a great humorous way to look at it. And
I hope I didn't overthink that one to explain it to you. But see the
please, this is your show. Carry on.
Okay. Anyway.
You were talking about your upbringing, the music you listen to. Obviously, you just mentioned Hot 5. You mentioned the Broadway musicals, orchestral music that Mom and Dad listened to. And then you also played trombone in the school band, which is something I didn't know. But, you know, so many of our guests have these little hidden nuggets that really helped form who they became eventually as musicians. So when you were listening to Mom and Dad's music, was it like, oh, that's Mom and Dad's, this doesn't work for me, or did it speak to you right away?
Yeah, it did. That's what I heard growing up, and when I mentioned Louis Armstrong, I didn't hear that until I was hanging around with the Cody gang in the late '60s. I didn't listen to jazz. I listened to classical music, and Broadway. That's what was played in the house, and I loved it. And I had kids records, which would have been people who'd recorded in the 40s and 50s. I'm sure I must have had a Tex Ritter record because he did tons of. So I learned folk songs. You know, the shoot, the blue tail fly, that kind of stuff, as kids' music. And later, when I became interested in folk music, that came together. But no, I loved the stuff I heard at home, and everybody in my household played classical music. You know, and it was considered a good thing to do to learn an instrument. You know, you could learn it in 4th grade in Ann Arbor, where I grew up. And I went there, and I didn't know what instrument I wanted to hear, and I was tall, and I could reach 7th position on a trombone. So they go, "You are a trombone player, fine." And interestingly enough, the low note on a trombone, the low E in 7th position, before you get to the blatty pedal tones, but
Right.
that first usable low E, that is exactly the same low note as the low E string on a Telecaster on any guitar. That's
Guitar. Okay.
well, maybe my ear got tuned to that, and I've always gravitated towards the lower fat end of the strings there. I'm not so much on the dusty end of the neck up there.
Up into the hinterlands. Yeah, when you're saying that, I'm thinking of the riff you did in Hot Rod Lincoln, and it's definitely in the lower end.
It's
Really.
down to E.
Yeah.
It starts on that very same E. It was the same low note on the trombone.
Oh, that's
Right,
awesome.
right. Well, I'm gonna admit here, I've been sitting on the couch at night trying to learn that riff because it's so hot. So obviously, then trombone, you were the right fit for it. Boom, you're playing trombone.
I loved it.
Now, obviously, you did find an interest in playing guitar at one point.
Yeah.
What was the reaction, mom and dad, and the rest of your family? Because obviously, it's not a traditional classical instrument per se.
I'll tell you, they were great about it, and always they were extremely supportive. And I love them and thank them to this day, of course, for that. But in fact, I was in Interlochen Music Camp in northern Michigan. Now it's called the National Music Camp. So my cabin counselor played guitar and sang, and I was just discovering folk music. This would have been maybe 62 or 3, pretty early on. And he ended up Dave Siglin ended up running one of the oldest running folk clubs in America in my hometown in Ann Arbor called the Ark for many, many years.
Yeah,
Many
okay.
years. I'm still in touch with Dave. He's the adult I've known longest in my life. So I wanted to get in the game. And my mom had a banjo in the attic because she had actually learned it back in, I believe, she was born in 1910. She would have learned it sometime probably in the 20s during one of the many banjo crazes that would occur periodically. And her dad was a commercial artist, and he'd bought one for a model to use for an ad he was making. And she had learned it a little bit. Never played it that much, but when we fixed it up again, she actually could play a little bit of a thing on it. And so my first instrument came from my mom, really. And then after that, guitar. And it was never, I remember when I first had my first electric band, it was a psychedelic folk rock band called the Seventh Seal, man. Seventh Seal. But this is the 60s, in 65 and 66. And we were playing in an outdoor band shell. We figured out we could rent this thing for $10 and put on outdoor concerts just like they did in San Francisco. This is in Ann Arbor, and my parents would come and sit way at the back, but they would be there. They would, So they've always been very, very cool about that stuff. Very, very. They were more than supportive.
And it's so important to a young musician coming up, having that support from their parents. I'm going to share a little story with you that you just reminded me of, because my parents, the same thing. And Dad would come hear the different things that I was involved with, and then started doing things when my kids got into playing music. Well, one of my sons had this insane, what would he call it, death metal band called Dark Haven. And, with the and the whole bit. Yep, there you go. And, I had my fake tattoos on and the whole bit. So I was going to see them one night where they were playing, and in walks my dad. I said, Dad, do you have any idea what you're walking into?
Do you know?
Well, bless his heart, he said, well, I want to hear what they're doing. And about halfway through the first measure, I saw him making a beeline out the door.
Look at the time. Oh.
Exactly. Oh, I got a case to try. But bless them for their support. So how did your mom gave you the banjo and then eventually guitar. Were there certain players or certain sounds that interest you in that world?
Yeah, right away I kind of gravitated to what was folk music at the time. And there was all kinds of stuff happening. I mean, right off the bat, Peter, Paul, and Mary and Joan Baez, stuff like that. That was the first accessible stuff. And then pretty quickly I found Pete Seeger records and the Weaver records, took it a notch back there. And this, of course, is right when Bob Dylan hit, when I was still in high school. I was a big, huge Dylan fan. As a matter of fact, I saw him play my high school solo in 1966. I saw him about 3 or 4 times in that era.
Oh, nice.
5 and 6. So that's what I liked. And then the first stuff I learned on guitar was Mississippi John Hurt stuff, finger-picking guitar. And that stemmed from the fact there was I started going to the University of Michigan Folklore Society meetings, which was just people sitting around in the hallway of this building at a landing playing, guitars and banjos. And they were all older kids, and I always wanted to hang out with the big kids, and so this was a way to do it. I mean, this was a way to hear all this music, and yeah, that's what I liked. I liked old timey. I liked the whole Seeger stuff. I liked. I loved. In '65, I loved the Queskin Jug Band. Maria Muldaur and Jim Queskin and Muldaur and those guys. Loved those. Loved that band. So I got to see them. I'd hitchhike from Ann Arbor to New York to see. I went to the Newport Folk Festival in '64 and '65. Saw the Dylan Go Electric in '65. Saw him sing Mr. Tambourine Man in '64. So so, and as I've said before, that shit ruined me for normal work.
There's nothing more exciting.
I had my little banjo. My mom made me a case for the banjo, and first time '64, I slept on the beach. You could still do that. Had my kid. So I was living the dream before I was in the dream. You know what I mean? It was just. I'm glad you bring this up, because I remember it was a great time for music too, because they'd all of a sudden cracked open the door on all this history of indigenous music, and the Harry Smith anthology was out, and people like the Queskin Band were delving into those old things and bringing them to life, and then Bob Dylan was there just setting the world on fire. So
right. So basically, you had this amazing education watching. Hanging out, learning from the masters. It's great that you mentioned the Queskin Jug Band. It's kind of a nice tie-in. One of our staff members, Jonathan Piper, plays jug, and he's been involved in some things with Jim Queskin recently, I think. So kind of a nice little full circle tie-in there.
Sure, that's great.
So
I just saw Jim, and we were on a festival together in Rhode Island on their 50th anniversary, and would have been in several years ago in Rhythm and Roots in Nennegrit, Rhode Island. And I saw just the two of them together on stage, and I was right. This stuff's fantastic. And as I was leaving the festival, I could hear their encore, which was Stealin', Stealin', which I incidentally had played in '65 with the Who Knows Pickers, my band. My one appearance jug band I ever was in.
I read up a little bit about them in your high school years. And then you went on to form and be a very integral part of one of the most successful bands in the 60s and 70s. How soon after your high school did Commander Cody and his Lost Planet Airmen come to be formed?
Well, it's a good question. I've always been a little loosey-goosey about that. I know by the end of '68, I was in California, and I'd been with them already a year, so I think we must have got together in '67. That's my best guess, I'm sorry. Or maybe even '66, at the end of '66, but right in there someplace.
Yeah.
No, and I had, as I mentioned, I had a band, the Seventh Seal, and they saw me, the couple of guys from that band, John Tishy and George Frayne, who became the old commander, they saw me perform with my band at the Ann Arbor Film Festival. And they went, well, this guy's different, This then and now was the only time I've had hair this long. So if you tell me it's 1966, I'm going to have to believe you. I can say
there you go.
So anyway, that's when that began, '66.
Okay, around late '60s, mid-late '60s. I got to tell you, I was in high school when the Hot Rod Lincoln came out, and it went straight up to, I guess we didn't call it a playlist back then, but whenever the AM radio, when I'd hear that riff come up, crank it up. Yeah, so man. How did the band name come to be? Because that's a wild ride right there.
Well, I don't know which one found it, but the old commander, George Frain's brother, Chris Frain, was a great artist and as well. They would, there's the band, yeah. They would, people would watch these old serials stuff, goof on kind of the old, Rocket Man, he had a bullet-shaped helmet, and I think it said up, down, and one of the episodes was the Lost Planet Airmen. And back then, and to my memory, nobody ever complained about that. It was just, that was the name of the band, and so be it. And, actually compared to some other band names like Frumious Bandersnatch or something, we were kind of normal.
I remember that band.
I just thought of them yesterday, and my wife said, "Man, I haven't thought of that in about 50 years." I don't know if that was actually the name of Fruit, whatever. Someone will correct this.
No, I mean, it was like you instantly like the name of that band, and then when you hear the music the band plays, you go, "Man, these guys are." They've got to figure it out. But yeah, I always found that fascinating that Republic Pictures didn't sort of say, hey, you guys can't use that name because, we have a Lost Planet Airmen movie, so forth. You remember when Chicago came out? They were Chicago Transit Authority.
Oh, yes.
And Chicago Transit Authority said, no, you can't use that name. So they changed it to CTA. Nope, can't do that either. So then they became Chicago.
How we dodged that issue, I don't know. I just think that by then probably that had changed hands, and nobody was really watching those. Those were serials at the time. I don't remember them being feature-length movies, so they were certainly off the commercial radar.
Got it.
Whereas the CTA was still a going concern, a going business.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense, and I'm glad they didn't come after you and make you change it. It might have been Frumius II or something like that. Well, the song really did well for you.
It did, yeah.
And, with your sense of humor, were you kind of instrumental in seeing that tune and going, let's cover that
Yeah,
song?
I bought this album by Johnny Bond, and it was a greatest hits album, and had that and Smoke That Cigarette, which was another chart record for us.
Oh, yeah,
It took us a little bit of while to get going writing, and I didn't really participate that much. I wrote a handful of songs back then, but I didn't really start writing. I still am kind of slow at it, but so anyway, and so there was other lead singers in the band. There was Billy C, who's the big rockabilly guy, and the fast rock and roll, and John Tishy, and who sang great at the country ballads and actually anything he wanted. He was also an old school rocker. He was a few years older than me, and was, I think in some ways was kind of the adult supervision of the band. Still very close to him today. Still friends with John today.
Oh, that's great.
So, and he went on to be the head of mechanical, aeronautical, and nuclear engineering at Rensselaer Polytech, at a big engineering school up in New York. Right when when the band broke up, he went. He'd been sitting on a doctorate the whole time.
Oh my! No wonder he was the adult supervision.
That's why he wasn't on the very first album, or maybe sure he was. That's why he. Anyway, there's some early gigs that he missed.
He wasn't on.
He was getting his doctorate. Sure, he was on the first one. But so at any rate, I forget where I was going with that story. Oh, right, and so there was this song, Hot Rod Lincoln, and we did not know it was an answer song. So consequently, you'll find that our lyric, we gave it to George to sing, to the commander, because he would, all he did was talking songs at the time. He didn't really he wasn't authorized to carry tunes at that. But although he can sing now, he's a good singer. But so he did that, and he was the follow me. He was the Sergeant Nick Fury of the band. Follow me. We're going in, and he was kind of this energy guy, and played piano, and he learned boogie woogie piano and Long Island.
Nice.
There was that aspect. So anyway, I brought that to the band, and he did that, and we worked out Smoke That Cigarette, and George also did the lead on that, the vocal on that. And I tried to learn the guitar part. Well, I went back, and we learned it from the Johnny Bond version, even though it was an answer song. And the original song went, "You've all heard the story of the hot rod race." We're like, no. We didn't even think about that. We didn't even consider that meant it was an answer song. We're just like, so, and we got some of the lyrics wrong, but that's just the way it goes. And also, when I went back and heard the version I learned it from, I didn't get the guitar lick right. I thought I really nailed it. We didn't even get the chords right. It was on the record. It was 1-4-1-5, and we just played 1-4-5. But now, I have to say, I like my lick better than the one I was trying to steal. And as I always tell students, it was originality born of incompetence. Take it where you can get it, you know.
There you go.
That's the way it went.
Well, that's funny because I was going to ask you about that, if you would consciously change that riff from the original, because I went back and listened to. You could have told me, oh yeah, I'm a brilliant writer, and I felt this fit the song better.
I'm like, no. Ludwig, is that you? No,
Exactly. And I'm going to agree with you. The way you play the chord changes fit better.
It's more economical.
Well, and you listen to the original, and the meter is, it kind of moves around back and forth from 2/4 to 3/4, and the what am I trying to say? The logic of the chord progression just doesn't quite make as much sense as what you guys did.
There's a little more extra measure, I think, in their version, the way they worked out the thing. And there's still extra measures in ours, but you're so used to hearing it, you don't notice it. Yeah. I mean, but they're consistent extra measures. It doesn't vary from... Yeah, and I'm not sure theirs varied either. I can't remember, because bear in mind, we were listening to the Johnny Bond version.
Okay, all right.
Exactly the same as Charlie Ryan's.
Yeah, I was listening to Charlie Ryan, and I got to say, I'm pretty good at following meter, but I was having some trouble, keeping that together. And my hat's off to anybody who can play that way. I'm so dialed into this box that it throws me off my game. Did you guys have any idea what a huge hit that was going to be?
Oh no, of course not.
Wow,
not at all, of course. And I mean, the first record we released on Paramount, as I look back and well, that wasn't going to do anything. It was called "Lost in the Ozone." It was basically a hardcore hillbilly. 1 drink of wine, 2 drinks of gin, lost in the ozone again. Great song, but it's not going to crack the. It's not going to replace, Fraulein or whatever. So, but no, and then Hot Rod Lincoln was the second single, I think, and boom, or it. Yeah. Now in hindsight, of course, I say, oh yeah, sure, it was good. It's got the guitar hook, it's got a nice aggressive vocal, but no, we didn't know anything about anything back then. We were just,
sometimes that's the best way to go. You don't necessarily have a game plan, punt the ball here and make the goal line. You're just doing what you do. And the fates lined up for you. I mean, as a high school kid, that song was an anthem. And Lost in the Ozone. And the album cover. I mean, it was all that R. Crumb kind of vibe that we were so into. Because in high school, you're rebelling against all that other stuff. So if I can, hear a song about being lost in the ozone and stare at this wild cover, you did it.
You could tell we weren't straight people, man.
Exactly.
No way, man.
Let me run down some of your numbers on this song. In the Hot 100, it hit number 9. Adult Contemporary was number 28. It was number 7 in Canada. And then it made the Billboard year-end Hot 100 Singles of 1972 at number 69. So, bravo.
Nice.
Yeah. Nice. And your live versions today, and I'm going to tell everybody watching, please find those on YouTube. I just listened to another one this morning where you just take it all around the guitar bend with all the different players you're emulating. It is genius. It's fun, funny, and a great story. Bill, I've got a question from one of our viewers, Brian. He's a very faithful watcher and a museum volunteer.
Brian, thank you.
That's it. That's the question. He's also a guitarist, so I know he knows what he's wanting to find out about. His question, kind of a 2-point question: why the Telecaster, and why did you trade your SG for the Tele?
Oh, well, I didn't even own an electric at that point. My first band, I'd borrowed a Fender Jazzmaster from my buddy from the Seventh Seal, from Ron Miller, and I didn't own an electric. I had a pickup in my Martin. And I wanted to play electric. John Tishy had a, SG. He sold it to me for $100. That's what it was worth back then. And I started listening to, the reason I wanted to tell you, I started seeing and listening to Buck Owens and Merle Haggard. And both Buck Owens and Merle Haggard had guitar players which still loom large in my, love of the music. And that was Roy Nichols with Merle Haggard and Don Rich with Buck Owens. Mm-hmm. Then there was James Burton, who also played it. They all played Teles. Even Merle and Buck played Teles, much less their guitar players. And James Burton played with everybody. And there were like three of my original, and that's the kind of music, the Bakersfield West Coast sound was what really caught my ear first. Now, I was hearing Grady Martin and Hank Garland, of course, with Red Foley and everybody. And, the George Jones record, the George Jones and Ernest and Ray Price records more featured steel and fiddle on them. They didn't have it. They weren't as guitar centric. So the Telecaster, there it was, and why it is so iconic in that kind of music, I don't know. I can hear why it is, because somehow it just, I really have trouble putting that into words. But interesting, it was a successful invention because they have been competing with their original idea ever since. In other words, the valuable guitars are those ones from the 50s and the 60s, and so right. And they got it right. Leo Fender got it right the first time.
He did, yeah. That design really hasn't changed. Also, the Stratocaster, since their
which
inception.
came later, though. The Strat came later and was a little, was meant to be sort of a fancier version, but
right.
I just love the Tele. I love it. Makes you work too. It isn't like, it doesn't have tons of sustain, but I don't know. It's the hammer of the honky tonk gods.
I mean, that pretty well sums it up right there. Because I was going to ask you what you thought it was about the Tele, but I mean, it's got a real distinctive kind of a quack to the sound. I don't know if that's the right word to use.
Well, it gets, if I did write that song, Hammer of the Honky Tonk Gods, and I name checked all my favorite guitar players, they didn't try to imitate them like I did in Hot Rod Lincoln. But, Keith Richards, there's a Tele player. Chrissy Hine, there's rock and roll there. There's the guys like Bill Frisell, oftentimes it shows up with the Tele. And R&B, of course, in the classic R&B days, it was ubiquitous because that was one of the, it was an affordable, great instrument at the time. Yeah. So I don't know exactly what it is about it, but it's versatile, and I don't know, and it looks so damn cool. That's why it's good.
Well, when you're playing it, absolutely, it looks so darn cool.
Looks good. You put on a Tele, it's like,
okay, this
well
guy.
Dressed with a Tele.
There you are.
It's bling.
And it's funny you mentioned the versatility of instruments. One of my last guitar instructor was an amazing guitarist named Ted Green. Are you familiar with Ted?
Oh, yeah, there's a Tele player.
Tele, but he played Bach two-part inventions on it. He would play jazz on it. So he would take that Tele and dial it in through his Fender Twin with the bass way up and the reverb way up. Totally different instrument.
Wow, I didn't know you took from Ted Green. I won't be able to tell you anything about guitar.
Well, I'll tell you, it was 36 years ago, so...
Wow, that's great, man.
No, I'll tell you what Ted did for me. He turned around my knowledge of the fretboard with his chord voicings. Amazing guy. But anyway, just wanted to talk about the versatility of that instrument. You've got a great nickname, and you also coined a phrase or a term for your style. So tell us about Diesel Billy, and tell us where your nickname Titan of the Telecaster came from.
Well, that was something somebody in I think a Rolling Stone. No, I bet it wasn't Rolling Stone. It was a guitar player. Somebody in Guitar Player called me that, and I don't know if it might have been Dan Fort. He was always a big supporter of me. I don't know who did it, but somebody did, and so of course my PR department, whoever it was at that given moment, latched onto that, and I know a lot of players, a lot of great Tele players. I know a lot of players who can play circles around me. So I do what I do, and I'm glad that nobody slapped the guitar to my hand and made me get a job. But, I don't like to set myself apart. But the nice thing about Titan is they're like, What's a Titan exactly? Is that like is that good or bad? I'm not trying to. So, but the Dieselbilly thing, that was kind of I did gravitate towards truck driving music, and they've asked me, what do you like, trucks? No, not particularly, and I really hadn't been on the road that much when I first discovered it, but it was a legitimate genre of music back when I first started falling in love with country music, which was the extension of the old-timey and bluegrass and blues that I'd been listening to before that, when I discovered electric country music, specifically the California stuff more, although I liked it all. I liked Hank and, Jimmy, of course, and Jimmy Rogers. But, and a lot of it had that low-end guitar lines in it. That was it wasn't always the case, but stuff like, truck 6 Days on the Road, and all the Red Simpson songs, from his Roll Truck Roll album, which was a great Capitol Records Ken Nelson produced album. So, Diesel. I forgot where I was going. So Dieselbilly. People would ask me what I play. And what happened was I really liked all kinds of stuff. And that's one thing you'll notice about our repertoire in Cody. It covered a big, wide swath. We played hardcore blood and guts country, ballads and stuff. Truck driving songs, rock and roll more from the 50s-ish things, Western swing. We were the only guys playing, with long hair to rock and roll audiences playing flat-out Bob Wills songs in 1971 and 2, at least on a national level. And we liked stuff. We used to do First I Look at the Purse and old rhythm and blues things. Minnie the Moocher, which dates back to Cap Calloway.
Sure. Yeah.
All kinds of stuff. So we had a wide start. So they'd say, what do you call your genre? And I just came up with Dieselbilly, because given that since I am the king of Dieselbilly, because no one else wants the job, so I am the self-crowned king of Dieselbilly. I can play whatever I want. And it was a joke, but it just gained traction, especially a couple of different times. I used to play this wonderful folk. Well, I just did it not 2 years ago, right before the pandemic. But there's an operation called the NCTA, National Council for Traditional Arts, and they've been putting on folk festivals around the country since I think the 30s or something. But the guy who led it for a while was my friend Joe Wilson, and he took delight in having me play these festivals where they were introducing. There'd be Mexican bands and polka groups from South Texas and all kinds of great folk, really, and I played them all around the country for a while in the first part of the 21st century. But he would introduce me to the audiences, and Bill plays a form of music known as Dieselbilly, with no hint to the fact that nobody else did. I like that. And the next thing that happened was when I was touring with Nick Lowe, which was a delightful part of my career, my life. And he would introduce me with his lovely aristocratic English accent. Ladies and gentlemen, Dieselbilly Kirchen, and so I just love being Dieselbilly Kirchen to Mr. Lowe. Thank you, Mr. Lowe.
And it sounds so much more kingly with the British accent.
It does. It helps a lot. Yeah, Dieselbilly.
Did you sort of look around the room to see who he was talking about?
I knew I was Dieselbilly.
There you go. You wore the crown proudly. I've got another question here, Bill. It's from Jay Peterson. Jay says, do you know Jay?
I believe he's up in Maine doing a mural of Dick Curlis. Is that possible?
That points right to his question.
Hi, Jay.
He says, hi, Bill. I'm a giant Dick Curlis fan, as are you. When did you first hear Tombstone?
I learned Tombstone from Leroy Preston in Asleep at the Wheel. We brought them out to California and put them up, when they were first getting started. We'd seen them first in Antioch, and or maybe not. I don't think Leroy's in Antioch, but Leroy's from Vermont, and Leroy wrote My Baby Thinks He's a Train, that Roseanne Cash had hit up. He wrote Full Moon Full of Love for Katie Lang. He wrote a lot of great songs and tons of wonderful tunes that I've done, and a lot that Asleep at the Wheel did. He was an original member of that band. And he used to do it, and I loved it. I'm going, this is a fantastic song. And he told me where it was from, and I got the Dick Curlis record, and Dick Curlis recorded it a couple different times up there in Maine. Yeah, and Dick was in a band with Lenny Breaux's dad and mom for a while, and so Jay Peterson is all onto that. He knows all about that stuff, and he's doing a fantastic mural for the event recording studio up there in Maine, where those wonderful records first were made, with Dick Curlis, with Lenny Breaux as a teenager playing, and Betty Cody and what's his name? Is it Lone Pine? I can't remember. Anyway, so the Northeast has always been big. The U.S. has always been big. It's up here, you'll notice. It's
over
been
there.
An important, yeah, it's over there.
Who needs a GPS? Just call Bill.
Music in America, there's always been a real love for it up there, and so that's I don't know. Oh yeah, Jay. So hi Jay, and yeah, I just sort of started exchanging some messages with him about that, and very interesting scene.
Fantastic. I mean, just hearing you tell that story alone, there are all these threads of musicians, bands, artists, connections. I saw BJ do when you said asleep at the wheel. I mean, you're hitting all these.
Yeah. Another good friend of ours, at least someone we've been able to network with, is in the steel player Cindy Cash Dollar.
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
She's phenomenal, and I know she's had a lot of time with Asleep at the Wheel. So it was just so great to hear the connections. Like, it's a full circle. It's like a big family that you're talking about. You know, it's like, I know that person. I know that person. So wonderful.
And in fact, when I played that folk festival in Rhode Island, where I got to again reconnect with and meet Jeff and Jim Kweska and Jeff Muldar, where before I'd been a teenage kid looking over the dashboard at him, and But Cindy was I had Cindy and Johnny Nicholas in the band at that time. I forget what we called ourselves, but so I've got a chance to tour the country with Cindy too.
Yeah, she's amazing. She was a guest on the show. Gosh, I want to say in the fall. Mm-hmm. We've been doing this a little over a year now, so I'm starting to get fuzzy on who was here when. But it's just always so fun to hear current guests mention names of other guests that have been on board. You mentioned Maria Muldar. We had her give a concert at the museum. So all these circles keep connecting. Yeah. There's a couple of other songwriters. And given the humorous nature of your approach to titling and whatnot, just wondering if you've ever worked with them, and that would be Junior Brown and or Tom Waits. Very
Don't know
witty.
Tom Waits. I've never met Tom Waits. Well, I'd love to, but I mean, I'm content to hear him. But I'm sure he's a fascinating guy. I've been aware of him for a long time. Junior, I know, and I played with Junior several times. Through the years. Yeah, he's great. Junior, I heard him before I ever met the guy. I don't know if that's the case, but at any rate, the first song I heard by him was that, well, she's wanted by the police and my wife thinks she's dead. It's like, okay, we have a winner. And my baby don't dance to no one but Ernest Tubb. Anyway, so he's pretty phenomenal, and he invented his own instrument. And
what is that? What is that called?
Well, it's a git steel, he calls it. And
git steel.
It's a steel guitar, no pedal steel. Although he had a thing when his got stolen, they were making him one with some. I don't know enough to talk about that, but get him on the show.
There you go.
So anyway, but he's a phenomenal steel player and Tele and guitar player. So he had a little holster to put the bar in, and I think it sat in a stand, so he'd play the guitar, then whip the bar with the holster.
Wow.
And he would play with finger picks, of course.
Okay.
And great song.
Yeah, that must have been a fun time playing with him.
A few times we did that.
Nice. Now, the museum, of course, we're very focused on instruments, how they're built, materials that go into them. And I noticed on your website it mentioned a custom guitar you had made by Rick Kelly of Carmine Street Guitars.
Sure.
It said that the wood used in the instrument was 200-year-old pine floorboards, which really caught my eye.
I have two of them. This one is the first one I got, which I've actually put some wear on it. But it was made from Jim Jarmusch's loft, and Jim Jarmusch was the executive producer on a movie about Rick Kelly, which is available, a video. And the other one I got from him, I liked it so much, from Rick Kelly, was one made from the floorboards of the Chelsea Hotel.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
So, and then the Chelsea Hotel looms large in my, what I was growing up listening. When I discovered this music, it's where Dylan lived, and, everybody, and blah, blah, blah. So I would always tell people, this isn't the same Rick Kelly, but that Rick Kelly, I would say, this is made from the floorboards of the Chelsea Hotel. True. And I'd say, and the neck is made from the banister that Bob Dylan slid down right after he wrote "The Times They Are A-Changin'." That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
You didn't tell us whether that would get a true or a false check mark. So.
But it's a great guitar. It's made out of old growth dried out pine, and it's just lovely. It's got a big fat neck with no truss rod. You can see.
Really? No truss rod?
No truss rod. You can see how fat the neck is. It's a Louisville slugger,
I would assume that's because, the truss rod supports all that pressure pulling down. You need a super thick neck to maintain that stability.
And you don't. It doesn't go anywhere. And of course, it's pine. It's straight pine. And lately, I've become to realize from owning this guitar and other things, and I was a one-trick pony for so long. I traded that SG for a Tele. I played that for 40 years. I wouldn't even take two guitars on the road. It was a Tele. What's gonna do? Break? No. But I think there's a lot of tone in the neck. That's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
The fingerboard, which isn't intuitive to me. It seems like an electric. What the hell is this?
I'm gonna press the knowledge. Then I don't know now if you don't know the answer to this, but like how many Telecasters would be made without a truss rod? Is that doesn't seem like a common thing.
Well, actually, I think they were probably early on made without it.
Really?
With necks, yeah, and then of course many guitars are made without an adjustable truss rod, like Martins used to be made. I think the Martins that I own from the 60s don't have adjustable truss rods. So it's not, it's not the end of the world for, but not many people are doing it without truss rods now.
Yeah,
and his logic is that the truss rod needs a hollowed out section underneath the D and the G strings, underneath the middle two strings. And if you have that hollow there, you're losing some of the connection of your hand to the guitar and the resonance. And he thinks that, I'm not going to go out on a limb and say, yes, that makes a big difference because I can't A-B it anyway.
Yeah.
I'm trying to look at the camera to look at you, the world out there, but I keep looking at you guys' face.
That's interesting you bring up that point because guitar, as you know, you talk to 20 different guitars, you get 20 different opinions as to how it should be done. But the idea that hollowing out a section of that neck would impinge on the tone and the resonance, that makes perfectly good sense. Yeah. And the neck being as thick as it is, that would make it more stable, not requiring the truss rod.
Yeah, exactly. And also give a whole bunch of other things to, so that technical term, a whole bunch of other things.
Stuff and things.
But it just, when I first got that guitar, I hit at it. My wife, who's known me, we've been together since the early 70s, and she's heard me for decades and decades. And when I got that guitar, she said, "You've got something there," and she's not prone to blowing smoke at me.
Yeah.
She could hear the difference. She could hear, something was going on. A beautiful sound to it.
Good. It's that connection with the instrument that has so much to do with what we were able to create.
And I'll tell you right now, while we're going on this, I'll tell you, just for anybody who cares, I kind of am a middle pickup guy.
Mm-hmm.
And by that I mean in the middle position of the switch where you're getting both pickups at once. And that is sort of where I live on the guitar. And I will, of course, go to the other sides, maybe more to the bridge pickup. But I'm not this strictly bridge guy, for the real ice pick sounds. I've always sort of liked that middle.
Jump in the middle there.
For some reason that, funnily enough, it sounds the same no matter what the position is when I'm not plugged in.
Yeah, it sounds great.
See what I'm saying?
Well, you just gave us a great reason for owning an amplifier.
In fact, I did a show and tell with Danny Earlwine from Stumac, who's got a great. He was my original guitar hero in Ann Arbor, but and Earlwine or Earlwine, depending on how you pronounce it. And he did a video of it, and I was showing him volume swells, and I had a little amp down on the floor, which wasn't turned up that loud because we were talking, and the guitar was so resonant that it kind of took the edge off the volume swells. It'd be like, nah, nah, you know, it wasn't. You could hear the unamplified guitar so well. It took some of the fun out of the swells.
Well, that's a good testament to the tone of the instrument. I mean, since we're talking about volume swells, real quick, did you ever consider using a volume pedal, or are you more comfortable doing it with the volume knob on the instrument?
I've tried it a few times, and it struck me that I'm so far behind. For instance, same with pedal steel licks. Early on, I did this, which I'm kind of almost known for. I'm sure other people did it, but I switched the volume to the front.
Oh, okay.
And so it's volume, tone, and to do that, you have to switch the whole plate around, but you also have to exchange the volume and tone knobs, or else the volume won't be in front. You also have to flip the switch around, otherwise it won't be intuitive. It'll be backwards. So I did that early on, intending to do imitation pedal steel. Well, early on in the 72, we got Bobby Black in the band. Plays steel guitar, who's 15 years my senior, and played with everybody. He started in the 40s, has a letter from Jerry Bird, played with, I'm talking everybody. Back in those days, he's on some of the first George Jones records when he went out to West Texas, and he played with the Western Cherokees, which became the Cherokee Cowboys that Ray Price had. And back then, you would play with everyone. You would back up all the country stars. So he is my, I have trouble not thinking that he's the best musician I've ever met, and he happens to play the steel guitar. That's not fair, because I don't like to compare people, but he's sublime and a dear friend and just one of the fantastic players of this universe.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and that's not singling anybody out to put them above anybody else. It's just everybody who you hear hits you in a certain way, and it's different for everyone. There's so many phenomenal players in the world. Now, you've played with just all kinds of people, and as I was kind of researching, I stumbled upon this wonderful video. It's you and Red Volkert and Albert Lee, whom we've had at the museum a few times. The three of you trading licks on your teles. It's a wonderful video. And I recommend everybody search for that. It was the Folk Alliance. Tell us a bit about playing with Albert and with Red.
Oh, it's great. I mean, I actually first time I played with Albert, we were on a tour of England, and he was playing with Emmylou at the time, and we played a club in London. Actually, the first place I met Nick Lowe back in the early '70s called Dingwalls, and Albert came and sat in with us, and I've always thought he was just one of the most spectacular, wonderful guitar players out there. And he had that anyway. But so that was fun. It was over too soon, and but that was the way it goes. And earlier, Red and I had done that the prior year with just the two of us and a bass player, Mark Rubin, string bass player, and that was great. And so it was great to do it with Albert as well. But it's exciting and fun to, and there was no rhythm section, so we were, I don't even remember what tunes we did, but all I remember was tons of fun.
Yeah, I mean,
nobody got hurt.
Nobody got hurt.
And nobody tried to take your crown away from you, right?
Well, you're luckily into something like that. You're not competing. I played in bands with two of the most unbelievable players there. Danny Gatton was one. I was in that band for about a month, and Red Volkert's the other. Both those guys, I'm not gonna beat them at any game, And the idea was I realized early on, I'm not going to compete with these people, because if I'm going to compete, I'm going to lose. So and it was a good lesson for me. Just be yourself. Do what you do. And when I'd trade fours with Danny Catton, you know. And then back then, I'm a little bit more, can keep up middle a little better now, but Danny would be like, and in my turn, but somebody's got to go, and that was me, so fine. But, man, you know, I would just figure, I'd think, man, you got the best seat in the house. You're sitting next to someone you'll only see once in your lifetime, both with Danny Gatton and with Red Volkert, and sitting next to Albert Lee in that situation. And many other people I've had the pleasure with. But those two really stick out because they're, you know, known to be Tele demons, and they are. We're very, you know. I play with Red. Red and I, as a matter of fact, we got some stuff booked in August coming up this year with the
awesome.
Awesome. That's another name. I mean, he and Cindy did a tour, and they ended up at the museum too, and it was a crazy night. It was amazing. So
you had him on a concert there.
Mm-hmm. About 2009, so about 12 years ago. Probably should get them back sometime soon.
I was going to say it's about time for.
Was it the two guys, the rhythm section that Red had?
I don't remember the rhythm section they had. I just remember the leads. So it was so long.
Awesome. That's interesting, Bill, because again, you reminded me of one of the things that Ted Green would say, and because we would talk about this, all these, you know, man, Ted, there's this player and there's that player. He says, Bill, if you try and compare yourself to every guitar player you hear, you're going to drive yourself crazy. He says, be the best player that you are. And that was worth all the lesson time I spent with him.
It's very good to remember.
Yeah. Now, Red, what I find interesting is that his comping and his soloing, he really kind of pushes it out into the jazz world a bit. You know, he'll end a tune with a dominant 9 sharp 11, or he'll play a riff that's a series of whole diminished chords up and down, right? How does that fly with what you call maybe a more traditional bluegrass or country audience? Are they receptive to that?
Well, sure, yeah, because he owns it and he sells it. You know, he's up there doing it. And for one thing, he's funny as can be up there. He's got a great baritone singing voice. So you can't not buy into the whole thing. Yeah. And then, you know, when he does something and makes, depending on how, you know, if you know a little bit about music, it's going to maybe even flip you out even more because he'll do something like, whoa, you know. And, and if it doesn't flip you out, you're not paying attention really as well. And, you know, he's great. I mean, he played with Merle Haggard, man. Yeah. And what else I think for a Telecaster play inside, man, I think that's the end of the line. You know, Merle. Right. I mean, if I had to pick a favorite, which I don't want to, pick a favorite country guy, it would be Merle Haggard. The writing and the singing and the playing and his longevity and his bravery at making albums that were completely uncommercial. He made a Same Train, Different Time, a Jimmy Rogers tribute album that was very, at the peak of his popularity. I'm sure his Capitol's going, Jimmy Rogers, nobody's heard it. And he did the same with Bob Wills, tribute to the best damn fiddle player, you know, and just the songs he wrote, and anyway, I'm obviously a fan. Did I let that out? But so Red knows what he's doing. Let me put it that way. He's not a guy who's just up there, I'm going to do this, I don't care who likes it. He's not only, he knows how far he can push it. Yeah. I did a gig with him, and he did an Allman Brothers song with us. What's the name? It's got two women. It's a woman's name, the two words.
Was it Melissa? No. Oh.
Yeah, maybe it was.
Might have been Melissa.
A big twin, you know, Allman Brothers thing, and he played both parts at once and rocked your socks off. And and he said, well, when I was a kid, I learned that, and I didn't know those two guitar players. So, you know, he can do it all, and he's not going to. That's the nice thing about the way he does it. He doesn't lose people, you know, or try to play over people's heads. He is playing over everybody's head, but he's genial. You don't know it. You know?
Right. He's doing it in such a musical way that he's sort of taking you there before you even realize he's gotten you there.
And he's got some jokes. He's got this thing he'd do. He'd take a augmented seventh chord and he'd move it up rather than in major thirds, which would be the chord would repeat every 4 frets.
Right.
He'll move it up in minor thirds like a diminished chord, which there's no reason to do that other than make your head. And if I ever hear anyone do that, I go, "You got that from Red."
So true.
Yeah.
So we're believe it or not, we're up on the hour, but I do want to mention,
God.
yeah, it's these
I don't
conversations.
have anyway. Yeah, I would love to do this all night, but unfortunately, I have kind of a limited time from here on. Something came up that I've got to.
Not a problem.
No problem.
Do you?
I'm not shutting the door on it. I'm just. I don't have another half hour, unfortunately.
No, just wanted to ask if you wanted to say anything about the 2 CD set called The Proper Years that I was
I
reading
sure
about.
do. I was fortunate enough to go over to England and meet this guy Malcolm Mills, who runs Proper Records. And I knew we would cross paths because of when I was playing with Nick Lowe. He came out and his the guy he started the company with, Paul Riley, was the bass player with Nick Lowe's, with the band that we toured the world with Nick. And so anyway, he gave me a record deal, and we made 3 records under my own name and 1 with Austin DeLone, a duets record. And right before the pandemic hit, I needed to get something new out there, and Malcolm suggested we put out a compilation of the 3 Proper records, and he got them down onto 2 CDs, and then he put out an LP called Waxworks vinyl, which is 11 of my originals and 1 Bob Dylan cover. And it's great, man, because I get to look at the whole thing we did there in England, and I recorded them all in England. The first one was was the very band that I toured with Nick Lowe, except Nick played bass on this, and the guy who had played bass on the tour was the producer, Paul Riley. So it was that, and the second album was all the people I'd played with who had actually worked with either in the studio or live. It was called Word of the Wise, and that was people who are gone now. Dan Hicks is gone, but Dan Hicks is on there. I did a duet with him, did a duet with Maria Muldaur, did a duet with Elvis Costello, sang one of the songs. Nick Lowe and Paul Carrick sang a tune. Chris O'Connell from Asleep at the Wheel, the original female vocalist. Norton Buffalo passed away, the old commander. So that was lovely for me to get to revisit all these people that I'd had the great fortune to work with. And the third one was like a retrospective, and it covered a lot of the stuff that I'd done with Cody, but I was still performing them live because people wanted to hear them.
Sure.
So anyway, we put those all in. It's called The Proper Years, and it's actually done real well,
Nice.
amazingly enough.
So people can find that online if they want.
On my way, you can go to billkirchen.com,
Okay.
or you can find it online, whatever your of choice. And of course, unfortunately, I wasn't able to tour it because it came out right in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
But the first album was called Hammer of the Honky Tonk Gods, and my love song to the Telecaster is on there. And we made a video under quarantine. I'm masked for the whole time, unless I'm lip syncing, hold down. But it's a neat video. But you can. I tried to actually show you how I did the licks on the guitar. And
Oh, sweet. Good. Well, I know BJ's going to post your website link to your listing.
Thank you, BJ.
And let me just say, Bill, this has been. I'm going to have to go lie down. I've been laughing pretty hard the last hour. But
It's
this
supposed to be fun, isn't it?
It is. And, I have a saying, if it ain't fun, it's time to be done.
Well, my song probably the most popular song I wrote, I co-wrote it with Billy Sieb. It was my title. There's a whole lot of things I ain't done, but I ain't never had too much fun. So that's words to live by.
Amen. Preach it, Brother Bill. So I want to thank you on behalf of the museum, on behalf of all our viewers. Thank you for the great questions. And BJ, I'm going to turn it over to you from here.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Both Bills today, BKs all the way. Love it. And so let's see, what do we have coming up on the horizon? I'm going to throw us over to our upcoming calendar. Next week we have Tom Brislin, a keyboardist who has played with numerous acts, including Meatloaf, Blondie, and so much more. He's going to be talking about being in the prog rock scene and being a keyboardist on that. That's coming to us March 26th next week on Mom at Home. And then following that, we have a very special presentation. We got 3 guests coming our way. One who we've had the fortune of hosting before on Mom at Home, Henry Kaiser. Also, he'll be joined by Cheryl Leonard and Mike McClure. These are 3 musical explorers. Henry has done several excursions to Antarctica. Cheryl has done many projects involving the sound of music and nature. And then Mike will be a first time meeting him. But all 3 of them are going to be talking about their experiences in Antarctica, discovering the soundscape and the landscape there. That is going to be the second week in April 9th. We're going to take a little break on April 2nd and then gear up for this big one on April 9th at Mom at Home. So those are coming up on the horizon. If you want to see the full calendar, it is available on our website, museumofmakingmusic.org. We have so many wonderful artists and music innovators coming up, and as a testament for today's episode, it was amazing. I hope everyone out there enjoyed it. Wonderful live audience, both on YouTube and Facebook and elsewhere. Thank you for joining us. I'm sorry we can get to all the questions, but we only have an hour to spend today. So much to talk about, and volumes more. But if you want to see more of Bill Kirchen, go to his website, billkirchen.com. Check out those albums. Check out some of those live videos on Facebook too. So amazing.
I would like to say that I do a live stream on Facebook every other week. It's on Facebook and also on Austin City Jams, which is local on the internet. And that's every other Friday. And for instance,
Perfect.
Not today, but next week. And you can catch me there. Catch me on it's solo. Me and electric guitar. Just
What time do they usually go on?
7 p.m. Central, so it's 5 p.m. for you and 8 p.m. Eastern. 5 and 6 for the Forgotten Mountain Time Zone. I didn't forget it. I love it up there in Colorado.
Awesome.
So anyway, yep, you can see me there. Just a little shameless self-promotion.
Well, thank you again, Bill. We appreciate having you on. Thank you, Mr. Bill, for leading the conversation. And until then, everyone, have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful weekend. And we hope to see you next time.